No, I couldn't agree more. I think part of it is what's starting to happen here within our own locker room. The players themselves talk about building something special, and then that gets around to other players in the league. But I think I mentioned this to you guys at some point, over the course of the last couple months, and you just different agents call and talk about what they hear is going on here in Buffalo, and I just think it's exciting. We still have a long way to go. We have a lot to earn, but couldn't agree with you more. Erik Johnson, the career he's had up to this point, Stanley Cup champion, and to have us at the top of his list is pretty exciting.
These holes that you called around and talked to teams about, almost every defenseman was available. Why was Connor Clifton the one that in free agency that you chose to bring in on a 3-year deal?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go through the process, it started right after the season, with our exit meetings and the coaches meetings and scouting meetings, and just really trying to methodically go through, where we are as a team right now, where do we need to get to, and how are we going to get there, and prioritizing what we think makes our team better right now, with also making sure that we're in that sustainable success mode and not compromising on certain things. So as we went through that process, we identified, an upgrade to our defense core would be, critical for us to take the next step. Not just in terms of, you can really get focused on, a top four or this, but just really on overall a better D-core and then depth, and how does that work? As you guys know, when we had some injuries last year, it really hurt, so trying to kind of solve that, problem that we went through last year at different times. So in that process, you go through every possible scenario over probably the last 6 weeks, and that starts with phone calls to teams, what players are out there, who do we think would fit with our group, and can you even entertain a discussion with another team as a willing trade partner, which we'd had a number of and had what I would say legitimate serious conversations. But in saying that, like I think I said the other day, is you're weighing cost acquisition of acquiring a player, and then you're also weighing what potentially down the road for roster construction may look like, and who are you going to have to lose, to acquire this player. So when you put it all together, going through all the scenarios, we started to get more down the line of we felt that Johnson and Clifton would be guys that we want to target. They were the two targets we had for multiple reasons. And fortunately, we were able to get it done. I think Connor Clifton, to answer your question specifically, he's our kind of guy. I mean, he's competitive. He's a great character person. He's going to help our group. He's a good skater, physical presence. He has a real familiarity with the way we want and need to play as a team, obviously with his history with Donnie. And so, you're not taking 3-4 months of burn-in time to get up to speed. I think he'll step right in. And, and yesterday in my conversations with he and his agent quickly, I realized the admiration and respect he has for Donnie and the history, and that felt like a pretty good fit. So we were able to move quickly. But, he's going to bring a lot to the table, and seems to be one of those guys that you talk to for a few minutes and just feels like our kind of guy.
It seemed like the first July 1st free agency that I've ever seen where you could get reasonable term with reasonable money. Did you see that coming, or was that a bit of a surprise to you that you could do that? Because, obviously, usually you would have them almost pay double.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, Paul, free agency is a time where you want to round out your team and you can add to your team as long as you're doing it responsibly. But you have to be really careful of trying to build your team that way, and that's why I always go back to drafting and developing and retaining your players. I think you can make some massive mistakes on July 1st that may even, at the time feel like, oh, we got this guy, but can really set your franchise back down the road. So, yeah, I agree. I don't know if I anticipated that, but what we did internally was get comfortable with what we could do on term and dollar with the two players that we were able to bring in yesterday, and say, okay, and actually I'll use 3 because even though Josty's coming, he was here last year, you almost have to look at him as a free agent just the way it was kind of going. So with all 3 of those players, goes back to Mike's first question. I don't think we probably are able to sign any of the 3 12 to 24, 36 months ago unless we would have massively overpaid either on term or dollar. So it says a lot about what the people in that locker room right now, the players they're building, and what the coaches are doing every day to make this a place that people want to play. And that's really exciting for me because you've heard me say that probably a million times. We want people that want to be here for the right reasons.
You have a good team. You have 9 defensemen on one-way deals, who most of them played substantially last year. Are you comfortable with bringing 9 defensemen to training camp on one-way deals?
Yeah, I think these fall under the good problem categories. You've probably heard me say. We have 9 NHL defensemen that we like, and I guess the way I look at it is, you need depth. It's a long season. Hopefully, we're a team that's going to make a deep run, and you need good, solid players that can play. And you never know. Look what's already happened this summer, in terms of one of our players, key players that goes down, and these things happen. So you need depth. Now, we also will continue to have conversations, and what often happens in free agency time is it's a busy couple days. The dust settles, everybody kind of catches their breath a little bit, and then maybe there's teams that didn't exactly end up where they wanted to, or they need something. And then conversations start. And so would we be open to doing something, especially in the back end? For sure. But the league's well aware of who we have and, what we'd be willing to listen to or not listen to. And we'll see how that goes. But ultimately, if you're asking, would we go into camp with the 9? Absolutely. Totally comfortable with that. And I like competition too. I think anytime you can have internal competition for spots, for playing time, it's just going to push everybody. And I think that's a great thing. Yeah, well, I mean, on the in Rochester side, obviously Tokarski's someone we had history with, and he did a really nice job for us. We had talked to Subi about saying, and think had great conversations, but I think he just looked at the situation maybe somewhere else as a better opportunity for him, and we were quickly able to pivot. And there's some familiarity obviously when you get a player that you've had in the organization before, and and then adding Cooley as well. Yeah, honestly, the big picture conversation on goaltending, I'll go back to. I think we're coming from a position of strength. I'm really excited about the goaltenders we have. Goes back to a little bit what I just said about D. I think it's really important to have quality goaltending, and we've seen over the years if something happens, you certainly need a number of guys. So we'll see how it plays out over the next few weeks leading into camp. But I'm certainly happy to go into the season the way we sit right now. I'm comfortable with that. And part of the thing I do want to explain is when I talk about prioritizing how we make our team better, we felt that the back end, especially if we were able to get deeper and to get 6, 8 guys in really solid NHL players, that now it's also going to insulate your goaltending a little bit. It's going to make your team a little bit stingier defensively, and we have a ways to go in that area too, just cleaning up some things. Also underrated part of that is penalty kill. I think the players that we brought in can help our penalty kill, which also helps your goaltender, and so it all works together. But hey, we'll be in conversations. That's my job. The phone doesn't stop, and we'll see where it goes. But as of right now, that's where we are, and we're more than comfortable with that.
Being comfortable.
It was still a big part of yesterday, but we prioritized once we flipped to kind of after Nashville into focusing on yesterday where we would be, and that was our priority of getting Eric and Connor done, which was but it doesn't mean trade talks stop. And also there's a lot of trade conversations that you have leading up to the draft that maybe pause a little bit, and then everybody sees where they're at, and then could come back, surface again. So they don't go away, but it certainly changed, the way we're looking at our team right now. And one thing I do want to point out, I'll try to make sense of this, like from the defensive, just the group overall. We feel we have in certainly in Darlene and Power, 2 former #1 overall picks that are elite defensemen in this league, and obviously Samuelsson fitting into a top pair and top type of player as well in a different way. Eric Johnson's had a very, very strong, impressive, strong NHL career, but there's also a leadership aspect to that, and there's nothing like someone that's been through it, able to sit next to someone in the locker room that's exactly been in their shoes and just to help in that regard. And as I think about the amount of minutes that especially Darlene and Power play and Samuelsson play overall, what we really were trying to do is put a group of 6 together, and ultimately 8, that Donnie has opportunities to move guys around depending on matchups. Are we home? Are we away? Are we up a goal? Are we down a goal? You may see our partners change. So we now have a group that, in my opinion, when the game starts, the 6 players can play with anyone. It doesn't have to be this is a top pair. It can kind of mix and match. And that's what a lot of time I spent talking to Donnie before we got to Nashville, just about how that would work and what it would look like. And that ultimately became the goal of ours, figure out a way to work around the 2 picks and Power and Darlene that we have and add to that group and build something special, and also clean up some areas from the depth and penalty kill and different things that those players have. So just trying to make sure you guys understand just kind of what all the stuff that goes into that as we put the roster together.
Going back to the goaltending and I was just doing some figuring here on games played and stuff like that. I get it. Shoring up the defense helps out that whole back end. Are you still, and you say you're comfortable, but you're going in with 3 guys who have maybe a combined 210 games played. Is that enough to give you, and from what you saw last year, is that enough to give you confidence that you can smooth out the wrinkles? And not only are you going with 9D, you could be going with 3 goalies.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is I don't think opening night roster exactly looks like that, but it's going into training camp, letting the competition internally kind of work itself out, and that's a good thing in my opinion. In terms of games played and goaltending, I mean, I think there's a balance, right? You can go sign a veteran goalie that's played a lot of games, but if you don't think he's better than the ones you have, then why would you do that? So you could walk in here and say we got someone that's played a lot of games. So we have confidence in the guys we have, and you also know, you hear me say this over and over again, is I think that these guys are getting better every day. So you're also looking at where they are today and then trying to project, and that's where you lean on the coaching staff and Mike Bales in particular and say, hey, what do you see? So, yeah, in a perfect world, you have some more games under your belt. But I'm comfortable. I've said that all along. I really think we're in a position of strength there, and I like what we have. And now it's also in terms of how we improve our team, it's to clean up some of the ways to help our goaltenders out, just whether it's certain areas of our defensive game and our penalty kill, things that I've already touched on, but that'll be a focus for sure as we start training camp.
How much did the goalie market as a whole play into that decision too? Because those guys, there weren't a lot of them, and they got pretty good deals.
Yeah, I mean, the goalie market, as you saw yesterday, certainly with the contracts, but also just in general, is very, very tricky. It's not easy to predict. If there's teams that are looking to make trades, how many teams can actually do it, and then what's the price that you're going to pay? I mean, all that stuff's part of it. So that's why when you can have your strategy of really building around the goaltenders that you have, and whether it's drafting them or making a trade for them or whatever, I think's the best way to do it. And you can think about, the simplest way for me to think about it is when you just look at the goaltender market, and if you identify the goalies that are elite type of guys that are in that same conversation every year, who are they, and are they available, and if they are available, what price? And then when you start to work off that, you start to think about the variability of year to year with goaltending, and who knows where you're going to be with a lot of it. So that's where I go back to the comfort I have with the guys we have and feel good about that.
Before you got Greenway, you talked about Don kind of pounded the table, saying we know he can be better. We know we can get that out of him. Did he do the same thing with Clifton?
Yeah, he did, and there's a trust that Donnie and I have working together now for a few years, and a respect. and Donnie would stand up here and say that I challenge him on a lot of things and ask questions and try to help in my own mind understand what he sees. And it certainly didn't take much. I've been watching Clifton for years, and he's a player that I've always liked a lot. But I just think the passion that Donnie has and the belief, and especially some of these players that have played for him. And then when you just have so much more information about the character and the work ethic and the day-to-day habits and all the things that we look for, the intangibles, that helps. And there was also enough information that I was able to get on Erik Johnson as well, in terms of the pro he is and the relationship he has with Kyle Okposo. And it's we have some what I'd call younger veterans on our team, the guys like the Darlenes of the world that have been in the league a few years, but they're still on the younger side. But to have another presence of Erik Johnson, a Stanley Cup champion, that's able to just live it every day, but also talk about, to our players, this is what it takes. And his conversation with me yesterday was phenomenal in terms of him articulating what he saw in Colorado and what they had to do to take the next step to win a Stanley Cup, and the adversity they went through and the buy-in it took for some of their skill players to focus on the defensive side of the puck a little bit more. And these are all just valuable lessons that are way better coming from him than from coaches or myself to our players. So that all plays into it, and he's still a good hockey player too. That helps.
And you had, with Kyle and with Zemgus, you had leaders that helped show the forwards the way. How important was it to have a defenseman, considering all those guys are so young?
Yeah, really important. I think at times I felt like, I love young players, but I thought a lot last year at different times about your own experiences that you go through, and I was reflecting back to when I was a player in Carolina, and we draft Eric Stahl, and he sits in the locker room between Rod Brindamore and Ron Francis as an 18-year-old. And then I thought about later in my career when I'm in Chicago and Patrick Kane is drafted #1 overall, and I'm rooming with him on the road and just talking to him. And I was an older player by that point, whatever I was, and I was thinking a lot last year about, am I doing enough to help our young talent that we have? Am I insulating them enough with good hockey players and just the right kind of people? And how strongly I feel about Zemgus and Kyle, but have we done enough? And I felt strongly that we needed to do a little more there, and that was, Erik Johnson fit that perfectly. But I just think it's an important piece. And sometimes even however long Erik is with us, it can go for so many more years after, just because these young players won't forget those lessons. And that's something that was really important to me personally.
I call students July 1st students for a reason. You mentioned earlier about sometimes teams make massive mistakes. What we saw yesterday, there were things where I'm sure everyone in this room was looking at a certain team and what in the world are they doing? How much did you look at the rest of the league differently yesterday because you're no longer in 31st place and you just had a different spot and you had to maybe pay more attention to what some of these other teams were doing?
Yeah, you do, Mike. I think more than previously, but it still ultimately doesn't change. We have to focus on the Buffalo Sabres and what's best for us. And what I also balance is we have a really, really deep prospect pool that is as strong as you'd probably see in the National Hockey League. And so also forecasting where are these players going to be in the next year, 2, 3 years, and making sure that you're really not just from creating roster spot opportunity, but also from financially, to project out contracts and where could guys be. So that's a really intricate part of managing and kind of building rosters, but you also want to get better and win and be a really good team next year. So I pay attention to it, but we have a plan. We're going to stick to our plan, and I believe wholeheartedly that the people we have now are ready to take a big step, and they believe it, more importantly, in that locker room. And then we added players that will, in my opinion, just further that, move that ball forward next year.
You touched on it a little when talking about Johnson and Kyle's relationship, but when you had identified Erik as a target, did you reach out to Kyle about that? I guess how did you get that information from Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle and I, there's no secret, have a pretty strong relationship, and it doesn't have to just be, in my office talking. There's times where we've golfed together. There's times we've gone to dinner. His wife Danielle is just a great family, and she's become good friends with my wife Stacy. So it's all part of this, and I think when you have players that are able to look through the players' eyes and look at what we need to do to win hockey games, but also someone as mature as Kyle and can really give you a full picture of the type of people that you're talking about, it's so valuable. Half my job is really to make sure I'm asking the right questions and then keep my mouth shut and just listen, and that's something I've learned over the years. And so, these are ongoing conversations that I have with all of our players, honestly, asking them about guys all the time and tell me about this player. And not, it's more just as my way of building relationships with our players is that I want them to know that I care and I trust them and they need to trust me. But that's why it's so important to have that relationship so you can really get honest feedback.
Barring something unexpected, are you done adding up front?
Yeah, we had looked yesterday. There was a couple other things that we were potentially, looking to do and in on. Got close on one of them, didn't happen, but they weren't things that I was willing to compromise or chase to overpay or anything like that. So I think I really like where our forward group's at. Obviously, Jack Quinn is someone that we thought was going to take a big step this year and was going to play a key role, and he still will. He's just going to be a little longer, but that changes in terms of what our forward group looks like. But I also think there's a lot of internal competition in spots that people are going to come into training camp hungry for, and some really good young players are going to push. And we want to also maintain flexibility with where we go from here. There's still free agents out there that we could talk to and see where it is, and if it makes sense, then we would look to do something.
Have you had any conversations with UPL since the end of the season, and maybe this week can be a little reinforcement of confidence in him, I guess, that another goalie can come in?
Yeah, I had UPL over to my house for dinner. He didn't leave right away because he was still going. He had a little procedure at the end of the year, something minor, and so he was around for a couple weeks. So I had him over, watched a little playoff hockey, and just talked. And it was great for me because that was the most time I'd spent just socially with UPL, and I was really able to talk to him about that we believe in him and we like where he's at, but this is the things that we see that he could work on to get better at. And I was kind of waiting to get through this time, but he's definitely a player that I'll be reaching out to just to check in with. And our coaches talk to our players all the time in the summer, just texting or whatever, just seeing how they're doing, and our trainers and our strength and conditioning. But that's part of my job too. I just want to make sure. So definitely that's on my list. But I think he should be one of those players that's hungry. He got a taste of it this past season, and I think he feels now like I'm in a good spot, and now I need to improve.
Was that related to his hip?
No, it was just a minor procedure that he had. He had something on his ankle, but it wasn't not too big of a deal.
You have anybody in development camp who's not going to skate who might have skated?
Yeah, wrote it down so I don't screw this up. Yes. Because I think someone asked me last year, and I was like, not good. I couldn't remember. So Oslin won't – these guys are all here, but won't be skating. Oslin is still dealing with a little bit of a hip issue that he had late in the season there with Rochester. He's actually feeling much better, but just going to hold him off the ice to make sure. I do remind these guys it's July. This is summer, so there's no reason to be stressed or pushing through something. Leinenen's got a little stress fracture in his heel that he had developed recently, training and everything. So he's doing much better, and hopefully he'll be back for World Junior tryouts for him in Finland, but not exactly sure if he'll be capable of that. Kohane, as you guys know, when we drafted him, had a shoulder surgery, so he's here but not playing. VBL, not UPL, VBL. He's had a shoulder as well, so he won't be participating. And then Fiddler Schultz he's almost there, but he's got a little thing going on with his knee. So those are the guys right now off the ice. And as you guys know, I think, I addressed the group yesterday and talked to them about this camp's the least important parts on ice. It's really about making sure they understand at the end of these few days what this organization's all about, what the city of Buffalo is all about. They have opportunities to go see Niagara Falls and eat at some different restaurants and just feel what it's like to be part of something special in an organization. So that, for me, is the most important thing. And so anyone that's dealing with anything even nagging, we just make sure we keep them off.
Did you feel with Savoy and Cooley, those guys, they've just played a lot of hockey, they needed some time off?
Yeah, I honestly, Paul, went through a case by case. Like Savoy, you think about last summer, from the draft, combine to the draft to here to just go, and never really got time right into rookie camp, training camp, into Winnipeg. So then a deep playoff run, then into Rochester. We just felt that probably the best thing for his development, and since he'd already been here once through development camp, was just to give him take a breath, work out, just kind of relax a little bit. And then the other guys, did you mention a specific one, or were there? Kulik. Yeah, Kulik, Rosine, all these guys, they went through, that's a deep playoff run, and those tough games, physical, especially the Europeans, fly home, maybe you're home for 10, 14 days, come back, fly back. It just felt like, that's the right thing. And then we looked at Komarov, Memorial Cup, another deep run. And then, honestly, we could have had Devin Levi here. But, when he made the decision to go to the World Championships, it was another deep, into the summer. And I talked to Devin. He took a vacation, I think, to Italy for a week after the Worlds. And I told him, I said, I think it's better. He wasn't going to start skating yet. I didn't want him to feel like I had to get on the ice to be here. So, in a perfect world, there would have been some of those guys here. But to me, it's they had all been here before, too. That's part of it. Yeah, you go over there and you think it's kind of one, especially in goal, one plays, and they kind of went with more of the veteran guy, and he performed well. But Devin was great. I talked to him after the Worlds, and he said, "Hey, part of Team Canada, got to win, do something special." But the competitor in him was, frustrated and disappointed a little bit. But it's all part of his drive to get better. It'll help him.
You encouraged that you got a few of the Russians over here. Seems like it was a little smoother than last year with Kisakov.
Big time. It's and some of them came a little bit earlier. It was a process to get here. That's be a separate press conference to go through all that stuff. But it was actually really cool. I was just sitting down at lunch, and Terry Pagula was here, and I was giving Seth Appert a hard time because it almost seemed like Seth was trying to translate for the Russians, and I was like, what's going on? You learned Russian? I was like, you keep giving me Russians and drafting the Russians, and I got to learn Russian. And so, but he was kind of doing a little with Kisakov and Neuchev and Novikov, and introducing them. And I give these kids credit. It's not easy. Come over here. You don't speak a word of English. It's a whole different culture change, and they're here because they love the game of hockey and they want to be Sabres. And some of them are going to stick around for a while too. So they'll be here training in the summer, and it's awesome. And I'm actually really looking forward to catching them on the ice a little bit, just because some of these guys haven't seen in person. It's the first time, and even though we drafted them a couple of years ago.